The United States has been threatening for weeks to increase its pressure campaign on Venezuela. This now a clear escalation. US Coast Guard, FBI and Homeland Security operatives, supported by the military, seizing a sanctioned oil tanker off Venezuela. The vessel is believed to be the Skipper, a ship Washington says has been flouting its sanctions on Venezuela and Iran for years. While America is framing it as a police action, Venezuela is calling it a blatant theft and an act of international piracy. President Trump confirming the seizure, affecting the tone not of a US president intimidating an adversary, more of an interested observer.
As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening. You'll discuss that with the appropriate people later on, but no, it was seized for very good reason.
Well, what happens to the oil on that ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess.
Earlier, the man Trump reportedly gave an ultimatum to leave office last month, once again accusing the US of trying to steal the oil of a country with the world's largest proven reserves.
Anyone who wants Venezuelan oil must respect the law, the constitution and national sovereignty, and get down to producing, invest and sell our oil. Venezuela, an oil colony? Never again. Neither a colony nor slaves.
The seizure follows the biggest US naval buildup in the Caribbean for decades. Elements in the Trump administration, foremost the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, clearly favor forcing regime change in Venezuela. Signals being sent via a landing exercise in Puerto Rico this week, and with last week's national security strategy, which talked about restoring US dominance in the region, mitigating the influence of China and others. One clear beneficiary of regime change would of course be Venezuela's opposition leader and newly garlanded Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Corina Machado. For now at least, out of hiding and this morning meeting Norwegian politicians. She was denied the chance to run in last year's elections, which Maduro is widely held to have stolen. So would she endorse an external military solution?
Some people talk about invasion in Venezuela, the threat of an invasion in Venezuela, and I answered, Venezuela has been already invaded. And what sustained the regime is a very powerful and funded, strongly funded repression system. Where does that funds come from? Well, from drug trafficking, from the black market of oil, from arms trafficking, for human trafficking. We need to cut those flows.
She says a democratic transition would unlock $1.7 trillion of private business opportunity. But beneath what might sound a Trumpian diagnosis from the woman who beat him to the Peace Prize lie layers of often contradictory nuance. US oil company Chevron is still operating in Venezuela despite US sanctions, even though it has to pay its host government in oil, not cash, because of US restrictions. And an on-off deal between the two countries has allowed the Trump administration to repatriate thousands of irregular migrants back to Venezuela this year. There is increasing pressure, too, on the Trump administration over the legality of its strikes on alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean, all of which is likely to be playing in the mind of an America First president, increasingly aware that his political base is concerned with affordability at home, not adventurism abroad. Trump's Department of Homeland Security issued its own version of the tanker footage to the strains of LL Cool J. The question prompted by this raid, is it a prelude to still more forceful action? Perhaps the president's threatened strikes on drug gangs on Venezuelan territory? Or is this, for now, as far as Donald Trump is willing to go? Well, we're joined now by Dr. Carlos Solar, a senior research fellow in Latin American security at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you, Dr. Solar, for joining us today. Let's start on that point then. Does this look like the start of a much bigger military action on the part of the United States under President Trump, or is this some kind of alternative method other than that to try to put pressure on Nicolas Maduro?
Nicolas Maduro's government relies on the oil economy, so any disruption as little as the tanker will represent is significant for Maduro. The price of oil and the amount that he can get out of Venezuela is significantly less to what was taking out in the previous years. It's a potent message. It's a big warning to Maduro.
And I guess the question that he'll be asking, along with many of us, is what next? Does this mean there might be some more extensive oil blockade, naval blockade, an act of war by the United States, or potentially the kind of action on Venezuelan soil that Trump has been signaling? I mean, what's your assessment?
Well, this is a particular case because the tanker that was seized was under sanctions. So although there is not a formal blockade, the international waters north of Venezuela are being dominated by US warships. This means that any sort of suspicious ship carrying people, cargo, or oil will be stopped by the United States.
Is there something else other than access to Venezuelan oil at stake for the United States here? What motivates this big military buildup and this threatening posture?
The US is motivated by giving security back to the Western Hemisphere. We've just seen it through the recently released national security strategy, in which there is a Trump new understanding to the Monroe Doctrine, which means any non-state actor or any peripheric actor from outside of the Americas will be severely targeted. And the tanker, it was connected to Iran. So the relationship between Venezuela and anti-US countries such as Russia or Iran or potentially China will be disrupted by this new military buildup that is targeting Venezuela.
And we've been hearing from Maria Corina Machado from Oslo this morning, an extensive, long press conference in which she didn't endorse military intervention and forced regime change, but she signaled that she wanted international support, that she was grateful for US measures, certainly on this tanker and in other ways of pressuring Maduro. Do you see her benefiting in the coming months? Do you think there could be an enforced resignation or departure by Maduro from these sorts of tactics?
Well, Maria Corina Machado has been defending democracy and a way out of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Clearly, she has the support of the United States. They backed her Nobel candidacy. She has become the leader of the opposition. And since the elections, together with elected President Edmundo González, they need to run what's going to happen in a potential post-Maduro Venezuela. So everything that Maria Corina could do with the United States, it's welcome for Venezuelans. But clearly, we need to avoid any further escalation, keep to the international law, and pray for diplomacy and democracy to be restored in Venezuela.
I mean, on the diplomatic front, Maduro himself, a few months ago, seemed to be signaling that he was ready to switch away from China to open up more of Venezuela's resources to US business, try to court President Trump. And on the other hand, President Trump, in terms of his domestic politics, is under pressure not to enter into too much military adventurism overseas. So in the nexus of those two forces, is there a way that Maduro could hang on in charge in Caracas?
Absolutely. Maduro is an expert in hanging on. He's done it for the last 2 decades together with Hugo Chavez. The US knows Maduro very well. Donald Trump dealt with Maduro from 2017 till 2021, and he tried to create an exit for Maduro, a political one, through elections. That didn't work, and I think Trump has learned his lesson in order to know how to deal with Maduro this time.
Marco Rubio seems to be very much behind the push for regime change. And he is, as National Security Advisor, very intimately involved in that new security document that was published last week, which talks about a return to real US dominance in Latin America. So, would those forces in the United States be satisfied with some kind of trimming by Maduro, which would be short of his exit from power?
No, not at all. Trimming, as you've mentioned, is clearly a loss for the United States. If the Western order, Donald Trump at the end of the day, allows this to happen in the Western Hemisphere, on the eve of a new national security strategy, which is an iron fist of a revived Monroe Doctrine 2.0, this will be clearly a loss if the needle is not moved enough in a way that Maduro exits Venezuela.
All right, Dr. Carlos Solar, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.